maybe you can't control everything, but if you could take control of half an hour and use that to design what you want to do instead of operating by default, it improves, by my experience, the quality of life for the rest of the 23 and a half hours.
Hi, I'm Michael Hyatt.
And I'm Megan Hyatt Miller.
And you're listening to The Double Win Show.
Greg McKeown is a globally recognized author, speaker, and business strategist. He's the author of 2 best-selling books, Essentialism, The Disciplined Pursuit of Less, and Effortless, Make It Easier to Do What Matters Most. Greg is a graduate of Stanford University, where he studied leadership and social change, and he's spoken to major companies, including Apple, Google, Facebook, and Twitter, sharing insights on focus, productivity, and leadership. Essentialism has now been translated into more than 20 languages. That's crazy. And has impacted countless high achievers looking to focus on what truly matters. Effortless, which was published in 2021, continues his message of making essential tasks easier to execute and enjoy. He lives in California with his wife, Anna, and their 4 children.
One little known fact, he also endorsed Free to Focus.
Oh, I love that.
And I feel like in many ways, our work is parallel.
Yeah.
And I so respect and admire Greg for his work. His book has had a huge impact on me personally. I know it has on you, Megan.
Yeah.
So without further ado, here's our conversation with Greg. Hey, Greg, thanks for joining us.
Oh, it's so great to be with you.
Great to be with you too. It's been a while, maybe 10 years.
We were just talking about how, you and I were maybe babies before when we saw each other last, maybe not needing our reading glasses quite as much.
Well, it's been a swift decade.
Yes, it has.
That's all I can say about that, because it is now a decade of essentialism in my world. It just came out with the 10th anniversary edition of Essentialism. So as I was writing the new foreword to that, a preface, it has been fascinating to reflect on all that has happened in that time. As I say, it's gone quickly, but it's been amazing to watch the ideas go from being, well, first of all, you're just in your own head and you're writing about them and you're just trying to get them out into the world. But then seeing people, it become a part in a small way, a part of the zeitgeist, a part of Americana, and the different people that have embraced it in building whole organizations around the ideas and so on. It's been, for me, an inspiring and, humbling journey and moment of reflection.
That's awesome.
Well, let's go back to the very beginning. And what were some of the key milestones in your journey that led to essentialism?
It all started when I got an email from my manager at the time that said, look, Friday between 1 and 2 p.m. would be a very bad time for your wife to have a baby because I need to be at this client meeting. And sure enough, when Friday came along, our daughter had just been born. We're in the hospital. And instead of being focused on that essential moment, that essential relationship, I had my phone on, my laptop out, and I'm trying to do it all on the basis that if I can do it all, I can have it all. And then to my shame, I left and went to the meeting as well. And even afterwards, I remember the manager said, well, look, the client will respect you for the choice you just made. And the look on their faces didn't evince that sort of respect. But even if they had, it's obvious to you, to me, to everyone that I made a fool's bargain. So what I learned was if you don't prioritize your life, someone else will. And that's me, but it begs a set of questions. Have anyone ever felt busy but not necessarily productive? Have we ever felt that our life is, spread too thin at work or at home, where your day is being hijacked by other people's agenda for you? I mean, this is the way of the non-essentialist, and most people don't have a name for that, but they are pursuing a strategy they don't mean to pursue. And so the antidote to that is the disciplined pursuit of less, or the way of the essentialist. And so this is the quite literal, I suppose, birth of essentialism. And from it, what I found is that it seemed to hit a nerve, and that people in all sorts of organizations and all sorts of circumstances relate to that basic set of challenges and are looking for a disciplined way out of that madness. And essentialism seems to have been useful for some people.
Well, I loved it. I know you loved it. We read it
Absolutely.
years ago, right after you wrote it, and had a huge influence on us. So what's the difference between essentialism and minimalism?
They're complementary ideas. I mean, I think if you think about minimalism as being the physical things in your life, how you can eliminate those things that aren't, as Marie Kondo would put it, sparking joy for you. Essentialism is how to do that in the human dimension, how to be able to make the choices that clutter up the metaphorical closet of our lives, instead of asking, well, is this a good thing, or is this something other people are doing? You can ask much more selective questions. You can say, well, is this the most important contribution I can make? Is this a clear yes? And if it's not a clear yes, it becomes a clear no. And so, in a sense, essentialism in a single idea is a single decision that makes 1,000 other decisions. It's the 90% rule. It's saying, if it's not a 90% yes, you default to no, instead of the norm of our times, which is exactly the opposite. You default to yes, no matter how trivial it is, and unintentionally, you bury the essential contribution that you wish to make.
So, first of all, I love this concept so much. I feel like you were ahead of your time when you wrote this book. I mean, little did we know over the next 10 years how complex and overwhelming our world would be in terms of the decisions that we have to make on a daily basis. I mean, I think it's, just deciding what kind of sparkling water you want to buy at Whole Foods now. It's like, wow, that's a big decision. There are 45 options, for the plain water that is just water with bubbles in it. So I'm curious what you've seen over the last decade as the world has evolved and people have been implementing this. What's different now as opposed to what it was like 10 years ago? And what's the impact been compared with what you thought it would be?
Well, I mean, let's start with that last idea. I mean, essentialism, I thought had the power of relevancy in my own life, and I could see it for other people, but it was much more counter cultural than I realized. So I mean, one of the realities I think of this is that you can be an above average essentialist, and you'll still have enormous set of challenges with focus, because it's not like even a normal distribution curve where 50% of the people are more essentialist than non-essentialist. It's like almost all of us are buried with noise. And that's a word I didn't use very much in essentialism, but I use a lot more now. Is just people are buried in noise, that idea. There's so many kinds of noise, and it makes it very hard to sort of navigate our way through life, through relationships, and so on. I think that's one of the changes that I've observed. I think that what I've come to realize is that people need, because of the size of the system that is designed to keep people distracted, incentivized to keep people from other potentially more important relationships and tasks. I've learned that I had to build more of an ecosystem to help people. I used to think, look, you have the book, that's the mindset, and there's some skills in there too, so this is enough. But over time, despite that, people would keep asking, okay, well, what's the, where do we start? And I always thought, well, that's what I wrote the book for. That's where you start. But then eventually I thought, okay, no, they need that. And so we designed it. We thought we'd do it in like 3 months, and it took us 9 months to do. It's a very simple thing. It's free, but it's a less but better course people can take. It's, as I say, it's free for everybody, but it's a 30-day email course. They get an email every 3 or 4 days. Because as I took the course myself, I found at first we used to do it every day, and it was just completely overwhelming to me to receive it that much, even though I thought the content, obviously I thought it was good. And so eventually we changed the design of it, and so people can sign up for that because that's the place to start. So that was one thing I learned. They needed an actual, very sort of easy onboarding process to be able to experience it. That's something that I've learned. And there's been a whole set of other things that I've been working on and building slowly. that have, I think, now create a kind of a system. I won't say it's equal fully to the challenge of our times, but I think it helps to reinforce these ideas of essentialism, so that essentialism isn't just like one more thing. It becomes a different way of living. And that different lifestyle is the goal and what I'm trying to provide for people.
How do people get your free email course if they want to go deeper on this?
No,
We'll talk we'll talk about how to get your books and things in a few minutes.
Yeah, it's just gregmckeown.com. So GREGMCKEOWN.com. It's on the front page. You sign up in 10 seconds. It's the easiest sign up ever. And then it will just be sent to you a workbook that you can print out. It brings together the best of essentialism and effortless, so that you're just starting with the best of those ideas.
Great.
And I think helps people to kickstart their journey.
Excellent.
Fantastic. It seems like the entire culture is arrayed against us. I mean, you talked about this a little bit, but when you've got the social media platforms, for example, spending billions of dollars in research to distract us, essentially, from what it is, it seems almost like, I wouldn't say a lost cause, but it's an increasingly challenging thing to try to stay focused and to say no to all the distractions. Do you think it's greater today than it was 10 years ago, or about the same?
Yeah, no. Everybody knows it's greater. Like literally everybody knows, because they can just feel it. They can feel that they're in a kind of what I call red brain mode frequently through the day, when they're, we were familiar 10 years ago, we'd say, oh yes, multitasking, that's like a thing and it's a challenge. But it's different than just multitasking now. It's just an impossible game. And it is a game, and it's a game that, of course, the social media companies are literally paid to win. But it's like there's, starting just a little more than 10 years ago, this unholy alliance of smartphones in your pocket, social media. Even just those two forces meant that, this device in our pocket, like whatever it is, the one thing it isn't is a phone. And what I think it is a $3 trillion military grade, not just distraction producing machine. It's much more severe than just distraction. It's a disorientation machine. And I think, we're totally unprepared for that. We're no match for it. Unless we start to see it for what it is, and then you can take corrective and adjusting action. But if you just are swimming in it, unaware of how extreme this has become, how different life has shifted, almost without, each day you don't notice. And then suddenly, you wake up and like, well, how about this? Like nobody talks to each other anymore. Inside of people's homes. I have a podcast now, and I just had Brad Smith on there, who's the president of Microsoft, and he's one of the few senior leaders in technology. And I've worked with many, many of them in all of the major companies and many of the minor tech companies. And he's one of the very few technologists who really seriously admits that there's an upside and downside to all technology. He wrote a book called Tools and Weapons. He really acknowledges it. And one of the things that he says is for 100 years, we've created technology that makes it easier to connect with people who live a long way from us at the expense of connecting with the people who live closest to us. And that trade-off is serious. So you have to think about it this way, that these technology companies only make money when you make that trade-off. Like that's what their technology allows. It doesn't make it easier for my wife and I to have a deep conversation and connection. It will always interfere with that. And the same for children, the same for the people that you live around. And so anyway, these are some of my thoughts on that.
Wow, I feel like we could go so down that rabbit hole. And I want to a little bit, because I think personally, I feel the pain of this. I have 5 kids, 2 young adults and 2 teenagers. The 5-year-old does not have any technology really yet, except, an iPad if she's sick. But this is a real challenge. It's like we don't know how to be with ourselves anymore. We don't know how to be with each other anymore. And so can you talk to us about maybe 2 or 3 things that give us a fighting chance against this weapon that we're carrying around in our pocket? Because I think, well, I don't know what you think about this. From my perspective, it feels like just getting rid of your iPhone, like that doesn't feel realistic to me. But at the same time, the consequences are undeniable in the negative.
Well, look, I interviewed somebody on my podcast recently who is calls herself the opt-out family, and she really is advocating for something close to a Luddite position of you can undo everything. Like you can push back on every request. You can just live app free. And I found it quite refreshing talking to her, even though in some ways I find myself, as you're describing, like I'm not sure that I want to pay the price for that way of living either, because there's a cost to that, to call the school every time they do anything new. Well, I don't want to be on that sign up. So how else do I do it? Like there's a price in that too. So, I mean, I think that I was just doing a keynote for an organization, and well, I'll tell you who it was for, because I think it's interesting, actually. It was for Amazon, but it was for the Amazon. It's the section of Amazon that is responsible for the last mile. So when you have something delivered to your door, if you order something from Amazon, right, an Amazon truck arrives, but actually it's not an Amazon employee that's in that truck. It's somebody else. And so they outsource that. And so this group of people is facing a pretty extreme version of the life that we're all challenged with, because they're required to deliver at 3 to 5 times the speed of UPS, for example. So they are, there's a lot of pressure to do things better and faster and more efficiently all the time. And so they live in a kind of red brain world if they're not careful. And one of the things I felt was important when I was talking to them is to not pretend, look, you can just take control of this situation. You could just simplify everything. You could just focus on what matters, and that's it. They are part of a system they're not even employed by in that sense. So it's like they can't just change the whole system. And I think that that's a good metaphor for all of us, because it's not like we are in charge of these social media companies, that we're in charge of the way that technology is evolving. We're not in charge of OpenAI or any of the AI experiments that are going on. Okay, so what I said to them, and I say now in answer to your question, is, okay, what can you take control of? And the language I've eventually moved to is the power half an hour. Can you take control of 30 minutes of your day? Not the whole of it, but 30 minutes. Maybe it's the first 30 minutes. Maybe that would be ideal, but maybe not super realistic if you have young children, especially. Maybe it's the first half hour of your workday or the final half hour of your day. But these 30 minutes, tech-free, paper and pen. Now, I mean, this is music to your ears.
This is radical.
But I finally was persuaded to create an essentialism planner, and I've done that now. And I was under contract to do it, not maybe as much as 10 years ago. And I started working on it, and actually I quit and got out of the contract because I felt that it was, I just wasn't ready. I didn't think I had an answer that was useful enough for people. And so I just didn't do it. And then finally, I mean, it's physically not out. They just sent me they sent me the prototype as of this conversation. But here it is. We have our nice little planner. But in it is this process I have started to use 30 minutes a day, in which I do the following. What's going on? Free writing for 6 minutes. Get the noise out. No order, no judgment, no rules. What's going on? The prompt is just what's happening. You're like, what's in your mind? Get that noise out of your head where you can't manage it, and put it where you can look at it. And then I didn't come up with this phraseology, but what, so what, now what? So what? What is the news in your life? What does that noise reveal? Is there a signal in the sound? Is there something that is there a headline? So sometimes for me, it's, you need to take a break. Sometimes it's okay. You need to be focused and and disciplined today because of what you've committed to doing. Sometimes it's okay. You need to build in some pauses. There's different news depending on the day. And then the now what follows the 1, 2, 3 method, which is the one thing is, what is your priority today? Of all of these things, if you only can do one thing, what is that thing? And of course, we've talked about this before, but the word priority came into the English language in the 1400s, and it was singular, and it stayed singular, according to Peter Drucker, for the next 500 years. So it took half a millennium for anybody to start using the term priorities. And that's for good reason, because you can't have very, very many very first before all other things. And yet sometimes we're living our life as if everything is a priority all of the time. And so you identify the priority. And a rule of thumb I like is to try and spend 2 or 3 hours on that today, if possible. What I've learned in my own experience is that is the thing, whatever that thing is, that is least likely to happen today. And so this is part of the reason to go through the process. So the 1, 2, 3 method, I've said what the one is. The 2 things are two essential things that are also urgent. So those things more often get done because there's a deadline attached to them. There's something there. But if you don't do them, it certainly stresses you out. And then the 3 is 3 items of maintenance, which I sort of call it the laundry of our life, because it's literally true about laundry. But there's other things that are like laundry, metaphorically, that if you don't do them today, tomorrow or the next day, things get a lot harder. And I won't say that I do this every single day, but I think that I'm still upwards of, around 50% of the time, I think I'm doing it. And sometimes I'll do it once a week for the whole week. But this process, it is a tangible difference in the experience of my day. When I do it, I can feel time slow down a little bit. I can feel like I have something to come back to so that I can orient myself. And if I don't do it, my day just is frenetic and frantic. And you just don't even know. You just don't even know if you're doing the right things. You're just doing things and you're just reacting. And it's like reactivity as your dominant way of living, as lifestyle, reactivity as lifestyle, which to me, I don't think anyone would choose that consciously. Well, if I could live any kind of life, the one I want is the reactive life. But that is, that is sort of how it seems to be unfolding for many of us. So that's my answer to your question. Maybe you can't control everything, but if you could take control of half an hour and use that to design what you want to do instead of operating by default, it improves, my experience, the quality of life for the rest of the 23 and a half hours.
Part of what occurred to me as you were talking too is we're kind of swimming in a current of dopamine where our biochemistry gets hijacked by social media and everything else. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about, because it's so important in your work, is the idea of trade-offs, but particularly the idea of saying no. And I think so many of us find that difficult and increasingly difficult. You think once I become aware of this, once I become aware that I need to say no more to protect the things that are important, that doesn't mean that you're done with that. I find myself I have to keep coming back to that concept. So I'd love to know what it is for you and what are some of your strategies for saying.
I want to say one thing about that too, because I think when I initially heard you, really talk about this, it felt like it was primarily about saying no to other people, which is still very relevant. And I'm sure people say to you all the time, as they do to us, I'm a people pleaser. This is really hard for me. I don't like to let people down, that kind of thing. But I personally find my biggest challenge at this point is not saying no to other people, although that, that'll be a perennial problem for all of us. It's saying no to myself and to your dopamine point, the impulse to do easier things than what you're talking about with this one priority that is the priority to end all priorities every day. That usually requires some cognitive weightlifting that it's so tempting to just say, yeah, I think I'll just go check Instagram, or yeah, I'll go, do something that's easier. And I feel like our frustration tolerance is less than it's ever been. So as you're answering this, I'd love to hear your thoughts, not just on saying no to others, but also the man in the mirror is the problem.
Yeah, I mean, I love both of those distinctions. I mean, one of the things I just want to observe is the nature of this problem, particularly this idea of struggling to say no to ourselves, and in a state of red brain. If you're sort of in red brain, you want out because it's really painful, but we escape just to the wrong places, and it's extremely tempting to do it because it's been designed to be effortless, right? There's almost nothing more effortless than jumping onto whatever your social media, vice is. And of course, occasionally you do that, and there is something useful there. So there's that keeps you going in this sort of addictive cycle because you never know whether it's going to have something or not. So you sort of roll, you're like a Las Vegas, at the slot machines. What might be useful, this might work. Same thing that gets us to email. You need that uncertainty, and so yes, there is a system, and there's no pretense about whether these are addictive. They are designed absolutely to be, and they're way more addictive than almost anything else because they adjust to the person. So they are designed more and more precisely the more that you use them. So yes, this is a very effective trap that has been designed to work in just this way. Now, what do we do? Well, one thing I think that is overlooked is something you said there about the priority thing that's so hard, and the going to social media that is so trivial but so easy. And that's why one of the reasons that I wrote Effortless is because it's just to question, first of all, in my own mind, is it true that essential things are harder than non-essential things? Is that true? And of course, sometimes it's true. Of course it is. But does it always have to be true? Could it sometimes be designed in such a way that the essential thing becomes effortless and rewarding and enjoyable, and the non-essential thing becomes hard and challenging and less enjoyable? Like, is there a way to sort of hack the system, and stack the decks in our favor? And so I found that there's a series of things that we could do to try and challenge what I almost have come to think of as the Puritan way of thinking about important things. So it's like, whether it's like a bad 1980s motivational speaker, or whether it's that coach on the football team, or maybe it was a parent, they all gave the same kind of speech, which is, this is going to be so hard, but it's going to be so worth it. Grinding these two ideas together, fixing them as a meaning frame, frozen, as if that is always and ever true. And it's like, well, then people give up before they've even begun on some of the really important areas of their life. And so it's like the equivalent of, when somebody has a slide that's got 500 words on it. You don't read the first 400 and then give up. You do the pre-scan, and the pre-scan, you look at it, you're like, no, I'm never going to read that slide. And I think people pre-screen the essential commitments in their life, whether it's health or a key relationship that needs attention and so on, or even just the chores of our lives, or that one project we've wanted to do, write that book, do that the meaningful deep work. We pre-scan it. Oh, already overwhelmed. Go do something else I'm more familiar with, easier with social media. Escape it. And I think if we ask, like, for example, if we invert the question we don't even know that we're asking, which is, how can I do this really hard thing that's important? If we just invert it and we simply, like, you remember what's his name in the sitcom? Come on, Seinfeld, and it's Seinfeld's best friend in it. I can't remember now. George Costanza. All right, it's like when he has that eureka moment in his life, Every decision I've ever made has been wrong. He says, so therefore, if I invert it, if I do exactly the opposite, everything's going to work out right, which it does in fact happen for that single episode. Everything works out right because he does the opposite. Well, for insecure overachievers, to do the opposite, to invert it by simply asking even this question, which is surprisingly powerful, which is like, how can this be effortless? Just that's it. Here's the important thing. You've done your planning. Here's the priority. You're about to get to it. You're imagining that you're going to climb Everest, and you just say, well, is there an effortless way to achieve this? Can I make effortless progress on this? And just even that inversion at first seems so counterintuitive. It's like, that doesn't seem realistic, and it shows us some of the thinking that's in our heads and how deep it is. Well, that's lazy. Effortless, easy must equal lazy. I don't want to be lazy. Well, let's just be obvious here. Easy does not equal lazy. Like, that's literally true. Easy is something doesn't require effort. Lazy is not willing to put in effort in this world where cognitive burden, that effort, that's what we mean by modern effort, is cognitive burden. You want everything essential to be as effortless as possible so that you free up some mental space to be able to think and to work out what the next level of contribution is. So that single question alone, how can I make this effortless? I can give you case study after case study of this, and really surprising to a mind saturated in the idea that maximum effort equals maximum results.
Yeah.
If you believe that, like I still do, like maybe you still do, like a lot of achievers do, then you push back on this idea. It's not very comfortable, but that is so not true. The idea, what is true is that optimal effort equals maximum results, and that shifts the whole scenario. We could get into that.
Could you give us an example of some task that you thought was going to require an enormous amount of effort, but you asked that question and poof, it became effortless?
While I was writing the book, I was writing one of the chapters, and I was asking myself that same question. And I looked around the room, and in the room I had this printer. We'd replaced our printer, and the printer that we had worked perfectly well, but we wanted something different. And so it sat there for weeks. And well, why is it sat there for weeks? It's because there's a cognitive burden, not massive, but enough that I don't want to do it.
Well,
do we recycle it? Where do we go to a digital recycling center? I don't know where one is for that. Well, do we give it away? Well, who do we give it to? And do we sell it? Well, then we have to go through the process of selling it. Do we throw it away? Well, that doesn't seem right. And that's just enough of uncertainty that's why it's still there. And I started going through that same flow, but I was noticing it this time, that I'm doing it the hard way. I'm making it harder than it needs to be. So I asked this question, well, how could it be effortless? How can it be effortless to have that no longer there in a way that I feel good about it? And I literally look up and I see that down the road there are some workers, and I thought, I wonder if they want it. So I walked out. I said, hey, we got this printer. It's in good working condition. Do you know anyone wants it? They did. It was loaded into their car within 2 minutes, actually timed between the time I asked the question and it was completed. Now, that's a tiny illustration. I'm not saying everything's like that. But here's what I do know. If I hadn't asked the question, I would never have got that answer.
Yeah.
So we're priming ourselves with very effortful, draining, exhausting questions that keep otherwise, like I say, insecure overachievers stuck and not breaking through to the next level. But now I have to give you another case study because you like case studies. Can I give you another case study?
Yes,
Please.
This is a brilliant middle manager. Woman, married, children. She's the kind of person who she told me, I feel guilty if I eat lunch. Not if I take a break to eat lunch, just if she eats lunch, she feels guilty. So she's tuned a certain way, and I don't think she's the only person attuned that way. That if she isn't sacrificing her health or sacrificing something, she's not good. She's not a righteous person. She's not that couldn't be the holy path, that kind of thing. And so she was up at 4 a.m. in the morning photoshopping something for her youth group the next day. No one's asking her to do that. No one's expecting her to do it. The impact of that extra few hours is minimal. She's certainly well past optimal performance. I'm sure that you'd say that's diminishing returns or even negative returns, meaning if you had not done it, you'd be in a better position than by doing it. So this is the norm of her life. So I give her the coaching. I was like, look, it's simple. You ask the question, how can I make it effortless? Let's just ask that better question. It might not always relate, but it might. So use it. So the next day she gets a phone call from, she works at a university, and the professor calls. She's in charge of their videography department and some other departments. But he said, listen, I just need you to come and get your team and just record my class for the semester. And in the moment that he asked, she was already thinking like an insecure overachiever. But this time she noticed the thought pattern was like this. Okay, I'm going to wow him. That's the first thought. I'm going to wow him. I'm going to, and what does that mean to me? In her head, she's like, well, we can bring a whole team in. We can have multiple camera angles. We're going to edit it together to be the optimal video performance. We're going to have music, intro and outro. We'll have some graphics. We'll splice in his slides. And so, these are the things that are already in her mind. This is in the micro moment after the request is made. But she notices this time that she's making it more complicated than it has to be, or she might be. So she just asked a couple more questions. Well, who is this for? And when do they need it? And when do you need an answer? And she just pauses before offering both a yes and all the extras he hadn't even asked for. And it turns out that it was for one student who was going to miss a few classes because of an athletic commitment.
Oh my gosh.
And so she's like, how can I make it effortless? She said, well, if you thought about maybe asking someone else in the class just to record it on their iPhone, the audio or the video, and then just sending it to him. And, the professor's like facepalm moment. He's like, I hadn't thought about any of that. That's the answer. That will do. I'll just go with that. Sorry for wasting your time. So she, hangs up the phone and she's like, what just happened? I just saved 4 months of time, the whole semester, for a whole team, and all of the energy going into it that would have been creating something that was completely underappreciated because it didn't address the real issue. And extra strain. And for one question, one noticing of how I'm making the decision literally did make the execution effortless, actually effortless for her and practically effortless for the professor as well. And that to me was another one of these moments. I'm not saying you can do it about everything, but if you don't ask the question, then you can't find an effortless answer. And it's surprising when you give the Google, of your mind a better question, it starts searching for better answers. And look, yeah, okay, I'll pause.
Well, I love that because I tend to be somebody that over-engineers things.
Mm-hmm.
And when I get a request, it's like, how can I wow them? And it's
Right.
probably, who knows, the insecure overachiever part of me. But golly, just pushing the pause button and asking that question is incredible.
Mm-hmm. I think there's so many examples of this. I think about a consultant that we've been working with, Brian Harris, from a company called Growth Tools. And I was just recommending him to another CEO friend of mine today. And as I was writing that recommendation, I said, the thing that Brian is brilliant at is making things that are overwhelming and complex simple and effective. It's like you slap your head every time you talk to him because you're like, oh, I've been working on this problem for 6 months and it was actually always this easy. And, I just like, what kind of energy and brain power am I using trying to solve these problems? But I think that you're so right. And what I'm taking away from this myself is that we've got to become self-aware about the internal dialogue that we have when we're starting to solve a problem, because our kind of default bias around this is going to be really hard, but it's going to be worth it. I mean, I did that like earlier today. I was working on a slide deck And I did that earlier today. I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, really, like, it's not even hard. Like, it's not even hard. And in my mind, it's like, I gotta like really work up the, enthusiasm to do this thing. And then it takes way longer. It's actually hard because of all the hard I thought it was going to be, not because of all the hard it actually is. Now I feel like I'm just tangling myself up.
No. It makes perfect sense. Just this morning, I was saying to my daughter, "Hey, listen, you need to have get your room tidied before A, B, and C." And she playfully fainted on the floor in like overwhelm at this task, and it was pretty funny. But then I said, listen, literally set a timer, do a little microburst. You just do 10 minutes, set a timer, and at 10 minutes, just you're done wherever you are. And she literally, I audibly heard her response. She's like, oh, yeah, okay. And that was something she could sign up for. But the thought of like like, when are we done? How do we know when we're done? It's another good question to make execution more effortless. How do we know when we're done? Oh my, I wasn't going to share this story, but this is such a fun one too. But have you heard of the Vasa? Do you know the Vasa story?
No.
This is okay. So this is in Sweden, and at the time, it was all about the size of your ships and your armada. And that was how you showed your prowess, because of course that was your military dominance. And so the king of Sweden decides he's going to have the greatest ship that's ever been built. And so he starts the building of it. He selects a forest of 1,000 trees that's available, opens the coffers, an almost unlimited budget, gets the ship builder, the best that he can find, and let's go. We're going to build this ship. But he just keeps changing all the way along what it is that he wants in the ship. So after they have cut everything for the ship, all the wood, he decides he wants the ship to be twice as long. And so everything they've done has to be redone. Okay, so that's an example. Then he decides he wants to add cannons and a second set of cannons. Okay, so that's like a whole set of work. Then he says, in a truly sort of non-essentialist, unnecessary complexity, he wants to add just an unbelievable set of hundreds of ornate statues to it. And so that, of course, apparently one of these, I don't remember which, but one of these changes gave him a heart attack, and it killed him. And so the second in command now is in charge of building the ship. And so the story continues unimaginably as changes continue and years go by. Well, finally, they get to a day, not at completion. The Vasa is still not finished, but the king has organized a date in which he wants to show off the ship. And he's brought all the VIPs and the other people from the Scandinavian countries, all of the other royalty and so on, and they bring them out. And so he wants to show it off. Doesn't want to complete it. Doesn't want to actually figure out what done looks like still, but still wants to show off what he has. So it is an untested ship. So it goes out, and he wants them to do a gun salute to show off to these VIPs. And in doing that, what happens is that, first of all of the windows are open, and not glass windows, but the wooden windows are open. And because they haven't tested it, and they suddenly put all these cannons on there, it pulls the ship immediately over. And so instantly it's filled with water. It goes basically 1 mile and lasts 1 hour. It's actually quite tragic. I'm sort of setting up in a humorous way, because like the whole ship goes down with the entire crew. That is such a ridiculous version of what happens if you don't just say, done looks like this. This is how I'll know. Everything can be improved. Everything can be changed. Everything. And I'm in favor of doing things in a great way. I'm not suggesting we just accept low standards, but to just add frills and complexity endlessly makes it, impossible to finish, and it burns us up all of the way. And how many times have we done that on things that don't even matter to us? Or we take something that does matter, but we've now made it twice as challenging. And I can put this all to you in 2 questions, which is, who wants 10x results, both in terms of quantity and quality? Yes, everybody wants that. So then the corollary question is, who can work 10 times harder? And for any insecure overachiever, the answer is no. No one can do that. And so if you put those two questions together, you have the 10x dilemma. That's why I wrote Effortless. We cannot just do what we've been doing 10 times more. We can't just over-engineer, overcomplicate 10 times more to get to where we want. We need a different, simpler path to be able to achieve what matters to us, so that we can achieve what matters, but without burning out.
It's easy to complicate things. It takes a lot of effort to make things simple. And I think that this is one of the things that I loved and admired about Steve Jobs.
Right.
He would persist on product design till he got this simple, elegant solution. And at the time we're recording this, the iPhone 16 has just come out, and we have yet another button. Steve didn't want any buttons, right? He wanted it elegant and simple.
Right.
And so they added that one button on the iPhone 15, that you can program. And now they got this other camera control button. And so now it's getting more complicated, and it's just more to learn. And I was showing Megan the button today because she has a new iPhone 16, and she says, "Oh, I didn't even notice that. What is that for?" I mean, probably something she doesn't need.
Probably something it's solving a problem I didn't even know that I had.
Well, okay, so let's stay on Steve Jobs for a second, because this was one of this is important. If we say it like this, if we say essentialism equals focus, effortless equals simplification, like that's how to think of them differently. If essentialism is about doing the right things, effortless is about doing them in the right way, and it really matters. So Steve Jobs' story about this, do you remember when he first returns to Apple, and they're creating the eMac, which is the very colorful machine. It looks really different to the PCs at the time. He wanted to add the iDVD software to that. So this allows you to burn a DVD. Okay, so obviously it's almost a generation ago now, or at least it feels like it. And at the time, which is hard to recall, DVD burning was a very specialized industry. And so your typical machine would cost maybe $60,000 just to be able to burn DVDs. So they buy a company that specializes in DVD burning, and their manual for using that software was 5,000 pages long. Wow. All right. So you can kind of get a sense of what period we're in. They're given a certain amount of time, I think only a couple of weeks, but they're given like 2 weeks to prepare for their first meeting with Steve Jobs, to review the product and to try and show. And so they know ahead of time they have to simplify this and significantly simplify it. And so they create, I talked to the one of the engineers that was involved in the whole process and was in that meeting when they met with Steve, and they prepared their slide deck, and they had just spent the whole time removing features after features that they thought were just necessary only for a very specialized audience and so on. And they were really proud of what they had. I mean, they could see it and they could feel that sense, like we were saying with the closet. We got rid of a lot of the clutter, and you go, oh, this just feels so much better. And why didn't we do this before? This is just a much better product already here. And when Steve comes in, he doesn't look at the presentation, doesn't do any of it. He walks to the whiteboard, and he just draws one rectangle. And so that's the eMac screen, and one button on the screen, which he writes burn. And he says, you drag your item into the rectangle and you press burn. That's the app we're going to build. Okay. So in that moment, everyone in the room, like they said, they never shared that presentation. They never shared any of the stuff because they were immediately embarrassed about all of it. But he said, but I learned a lesson forever. And this is literally true of all of the great simplifiers that I either read about or researched or interviewed, is that this is the difference. They don't take the complexity and cut off a bit of the unnecessary complexity. They start with zero. And that's the difference. And it's a really important inversion. You don't say, hey, it takes 20 steps. How can I do it in 19? You say, if we're starting today, how can we do it in one step? How can you make it effortless? How can you make it so easy? It's just mind-blowingly different than what everyone else is designing. Anyway, start with zero seems to me to be a helpful sort of tool when we're thinking about simplification.
We've been talking about the arena kind of work mostly, but our personal lives are more complicated. One of the things that I've noticed as a grandparent now, watching my daughters with their kids, is how non-essential that world is. You know, it's like,
Wait, being a grandparent's not essential, or being a parent's not essential?
the arena in which your kids operate.
Yeah.
You know, it's like every teacher thinks
Yes.
you've got full time to work on their homework.
That's so true.
Every sport thinks you need to, be doing that and only that.
Right.
And it can be crazy what happens to your personal life when you say yes to all these opportunities. So how do you think about it in the arena of sort of family and
That's a great question.
personal stuff?
I want to think about like the honest answer to that question. I'm thinking first in my own life about the extent to which we've done this or not been able to do this. And we ended up homeschooling for almost a decade. We've just come to a close with that. That sort of definitely overcomplicated our lives. Like in one sense, it's like a huge mistake. And on the other hand, it was sort of a radical. It was a radical move, and I haven't regretted it in any strategic sense. I know that's not really the answer that you're looking for in that way, but I'm just trying to think about. I think what one of the things that happened, we were in Silicon Valley, and we would go to these public school meetings with the other parents, and there was such a range of conversations and questions, and we think of ourselves as being fairly high achiever and driven and so on. But we would want to say, I don't think we ever really asked, but like, hey, can we just do less homework? I mean, they're in kindergarten, they're in first grade. Like, I mean, really, we want a lot of time for play here. That's what we really want. And that's the work for young children. But lots of other parents would say, we need more homework. Are we going to get more homework? I mean, it was real. I'm not exaggerating. And so there was just this growing pressure on our eldest daughter, especially. And we just thought, can we not just extend childhood a little? Can we not just believe that there's a natural growth process that she'll be able to adopt? And so we decided, well, 1 year for one child, and then she wanted to carry on, and the next child wanted to, and so on. So we ended up in this, in this unexpected adventure. But what it allowed for was a very different way of doing life. So when I traveled, about maybe 80% of the time, I would take one of my children with me, and I knew that was a good move. I didn't think that was I knew that was aligned with my values and my purpose in life. But now that we're sort of coming towards the end of that, I just think, oh my goodness, I could have so easily not have done that. But the trade-offs work best when they're reinforcing an overarching strategy, because instead of thinking about trade-offs as like, oh darn it, we've got this trade-off to make, you start to embrace them, because you go, yeah, I want to do something different. I want to end up somewhere different. I want a different type of experience. I want a different kind of relationship. And so now when our children talk, and I've got one on a mission in Brazil, one on a mission in Chile for like a long time. They're not for a couple of months, for like a couple of years, and one's at college at BYU. But I just saw them. I was listening. I was running actually, and I was listening to them all chat on Monday, and the sound of the feeling between them was so rich and funny, and sometimes talking over each other, but in order to laugh together and so on. And I thought, this is rich, right? This is what I want. This is what Anna and I wanted, and it has come to be, but it took trade-offs to get there. I'm not saying that the way we did it is what everyone else has to do or should do. I could see a lot of reasons people shouldn't do it the way we chose to do it. But I'm just saying that there are some I'm saying that the way of the essentialist, you're going to find yourself saying no when other people are saying yes, and yes when other people are saying no. And that because you are trying to be a different kind of thing. You are smilingly saying no, happily saying no. Watch people running past you. Okay, yeah, you look very, very stressed doing that, and maybe we're making a mistake in what we're doing, but what you're doing isn't calling out to me that would be a better way to live. And so, I mean, I know that's what I just gave you was the opt-out answer. And there's downsides to this, to what I'm describing. But the upsides have been many and rich. I mean, for a start, my children have read so much, and I feel a little emotional about it. But they've read so much more than I read when I was a teenager. And in fact, they've become the worst of all possible things, which is book pushers. So I never talk to them in which they don't guilt me about books I haven't read. But it has encouraged a pretty deep dive now into reading the classics.
I love that. Okay, but we're not totally done yet because we have, Greg, 3 questions that we ask every guest. This is our lightning round. Okay,
yeah, I'm not always good at lightning round. I'll tell you that in advance.
Okay, did you warm up like beforehand here?
Okay, let's go.
Okay, let's go. First question is, what is your biggest obstacle right now in getting the double win, winning at work and succeeding at life?
My biggest challenge is just that we've been in a transition. So instead of the children being with us all the time and traveling with me and so on, they're now dispersed, and so I have to build new routines to be available when they call. That can be random. So there's a randomness to it, which isn't especially convenient, to be perfectly honest, right? I mean, I have to figure out how do I create enough buffer that when that call comes in, I'm not just picking up, I'm not just being available, I'm recognizing this is the rich stuff. These are the 1000x relationships.
That's really good. I'm right there. We have our oldest is 23 and he always likes to call us about 30 minutes before we're going to bed. So we're like getting toward bed, but it's always worth it. But that's a trade-off,
It's a trade-off.
It's a challenge.
Okay. Second question. How do you personally know when you're getting the double win? Are there any, leading indicators or just indicators, period?
Well, here's what's been happening over the last 2-3 months as we've gone through this transition, is that Anna and I, my wife and I, have found ourselves without intentionally trying to have time to talk and connect again. And it's not like we haven't been doing that for 10 years, but there's just a higher density of it. So my wife and I have found that when we're unified, when we take the time to really sort of counsel together and go beyond the surface, it helps us in a way that we feel connected, but then the decision-making quality increases. And so we end up being successful personally and professionally if we're making the space to talk, reflect, make the trade-offs and so on. That to me has been, what I've been learning about
Beautiful.
that.
I love that. It makes sense to me too. Okay, last question. Actually, I'm going to lie because I do have one little question that I know our listeners want to know that if I don't ask you, I'll be in trouble for. But first, what is one ritual or routine that you regularly practice that helps you do what you do? So you talked about the 1, 2, 3 method, but beyond that, like what is one ritual or routine?
One of our daughters, Eve, is just like this buoyant personality. What would you say? Rock climbing, voluminous reading, talks 1,000 words a minute until she turns 14, and then she sort of slows down on all of that, and we think age-appropriate behavior, but it wasn't. It was what turned out to be a massive neurological condition that removed her executive function at a just breathtaking rate. So at first it was just sort of shorter sentences, and then it became like literally one-word answers. All of that emotional range was now locked. The right-hand side of her body stopped working at the same rate, so she's literally working at 2 different rates. Took literally hours to eat one meal. Took her minutes to write her own name, and on and on, and all the way through this. No neurologist can even give us a you know. The beginning of a diagnosis. I mean, one just shrugs his shoulders, because all the tests are coming in the normal range. And in the midst of all of that, one of the things I learned was, well, that everything we've been taught about gratitude is wrong, in quite a literal way. So like from a definition point of view, if you say, what is gratitude? What people will say is being thankful for the good things in your life. But if you look it up in a dictionary, that's not the definition of it. And that's I don't know why that's so interesting to me, but it is, because what it actually says is to live in a spirit of thanksgiving, and that's not the same thing, because what gratitude isn't for the good things, it's for all of the things. Now that includes the middle things and the not good things, and then the definitely absolutely awful, miserable things. And so then the practice starts to look like this, and this will test, well, I think anyone, but it certainly tested me, to be able to say out loud the following: I am thankful that my once perfectly healthy daughter is collapsing on the way to running into a coma and dying with an undiagnosed neurological condition because. So nobody wants to say that. It will stick in your throat. It will test you. It will test your muscle. It will make you question, in a sense, your own sanity. Like that is a huge difference than around the Thanksgiving table. Not that I'm against any of that gratitude either, but it's very different than saying what you're thankful for in the normal sense. But here's what is revealed in the process, is that you don't know how to end the sentence at the beginning of the sentence. So you're opening yourself up to the possibility that it's happening not to her, but for her, not happening to us, for us. It opens the window to maybe. Suddenly gratitude isn't a feeling, it's an action, like an action of faith. You are beginning that sentence and you don't know how to end it. And what that does in a among many things that it does, it instantly and neurologically has to change your state. Like it cannot not. It's an involuntary shift. And so you cannot in that moment both be in a state of suffering, misery, stress, and gratitude. You can't be in those 2 different states. Now, I'm not saying it lasts forever, but what we started doing is we started being grateful for everything. What I now think of as radical gratitude, even though actually it's just gratitude. But now, as I think of radical gratitude, it instantly changed our state. It protected our family culture. We were singing again around the piano. We're laughing again. We're praying together. And that took out this threat to go down rabbit holes of awfulness, because every condition, every possible disease, so many of them are fatal and so on. And instead of being consumed by that, we could think clearly again. And my wife was able to go, I just have this sense that this particular neurologist is the one to go and see. And we got to see him, even though it was an 8-month waiting list, and we didn't have 8-9 months, but we got in it on a cancellation, and he was the one that saw, and just a glimpse, just saw something no one else had seen. He saw all the reports. He went through all of that. But then he said, just take this dopamine pill, go have lunch, come back, and I'll test you again. He comes back. We can't see anything different, but he does. And he turns on his heels. He says, I suggest the immediate hospitalization for Eve for treatment for encephalitis, which is inflammation of the brain. And I asked him later, I said, okay, what did you see? And he said, well, when she came back, her eyes were blinking at a slightly faster pace, and so literally in the blink of an eye, she was treated and successfully for encephalitis, and so and so that was the beginning of a 2-year journey that as of now she is back, she is whole, she is healthy, she is well, and
Wow.
and thank you, indeed, literally, and so maybe I just share this, even though, see, lightning round, rubbish at it. Is that when we dropped her off, so she's in Brazil right now. When we dropped her off, she's going to be there for a year and a half. And I thought this was just going to be so happy moment. She's so excited and she's ready for it, and we're ready for it. It's just, think of how life could have been different, and so we just think this is all just good up until 10 minutes before dropping her off, and suddenly it just hits me like a uh, what would you say, Christmas Carol moment. The Christmas of Christmas past, and I suddenly, her life just flashes before me, and I think.
Mm.
And it's really awful. It wasn't a happy moment. It wasn't like a nice walk down memory lane. It was just horrendous for me for that 10 minutes. And the question that's welling up inside of me is, did you miss it?
Mm.
Because if you did, it's too late for that. Like, of course, you could be different going forward. You could be at any point, you can make a better decision and you can invest differently. But her childhood, that is over. So did you miss it? Did she get her life back and then you missed it anyway? And so it was really raw and really awful. And I I came out of that sort of experience with the conclusion: no, I did not miss it. We traveled together. We went on, just she and I together. We went on many separate dates together. We listened. We talked. I know her. She knows me. And so that was relieving. But what was left with me was this sort of two clues, two realities. One, that life is pathetically, absurdly short. I could feel that, right? Those years had gone by so fast. And I know that the days don't always feel like that, but life is going to go by fast. And then the second is that life isn't divided into 1x tasks. It's like there's 1x tasks and 1,000x relationships, like something like that. And to not get those confused. And that Eve was 1,000x relationship for me, and there's just a few of them that can be that in my life, right? And so to try and live the rest of my life with the awareness of that reality. It was always the reality, but I can live in such a way that I can miss that, not see it. And so I think, to me, this is the spirit. I mean, this is a renewal of the spirit of essentialism, and radical gratitude is in there, of course, somewhere as a practice.
Hugely helpful. Greg, thank you so much. I so appreciate your vulnerability and your thoughtful answers to our questions.
Yeah.
I just felt like this was a real conversation. So thank you so much.
Oh, well, right back at you. It's really a genuine pleasure to spend some time together. So thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
That may be like the 4th or 5th conversation I've had with Greg over the last 10 years, because, I've been on his podcast. We've run into each other a few times, but I can still remember back when he was in Nashville about 10 years ago. We all went and had lunch together.
I remember that.
And he really challenged us on a lot of things.
He did.
On this essentialism idea.
Yeah. At the time, I'll just speak for myself. I was kind of like offended a little bit, like, you don't really know us that well. I'm thinking, you're just charming and British, which he is charming and British. But he was really right. And I think that what I know now, 10 years later, that I didn't know then, is that we just needed time. I think essentialism and knowing what's important is a process of maturity. And I think in some ways we had to mature, in our business to be at the place where we had the clarity that we needed to be in a place of essentialism, which now we are. I mean, we are about the double win, period, the end. Like, we want to make it nearly impossible for people not to get the double win. And that is our mission. And I think we couldn't have said that 10 years ago.
And we're fully focused on it.
Yeah.
The thing that has always struck me about essentialism is the subtitle of the book: The Disciplined Pursuit of Less. Now, when you think about that, and Greg talked about that, basically the culture we're in emphasizes more and more.
Mm-hmm.
You just think about how easy it is to go on to Amazon and order more stuff.
I don't know what you're talking about.
And I've had so many situations where I just like mindlessly order stuff and it'll show up.
And you forgot you ordered it.
I know. Or worse, my wife Gail will say to me, what did you order?
Yeah.
I said, I don't know. It was like in my Facebook feed to look cool.
Yeah.
And then I never use the thing.
Right.
And sometimes I never open the thing.
Yeah.
And I think this really takes intention and discipline to pursue less.
I agree.
And I think you kind of nailed it in the interview when you talked about saying no to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think I pretty much mastered, not 100%, but pretty much mastered saying no to other people.
Right.
Because I've got my priorities. I know my time's limited. I know it's trade-offs. I know all that. But saying no to myself, and I feel like, oddly, in this season of my life, where I feel like I have less runway in front of me, it's almost like I'm greedy.
Yeah.
Like I keep wanting to do these things, more experiences. I want to take on more because, I see time running out.
Yeah. That's so interesting.
And it's a scarcity mindset, I have to confess.
It is a scarcity mindset. And I think that being self-aware, I mean, like I said in the interview, I think one of my biggest takeaways is just this self-awareness of the questions you're asking yourself, and I think that is a big thing. But, one of the things I couldn't help but think as he was talking, when you compare what's different about now compared with 10 years ago, and that's like a relatively short amount of time. Mm-hmm. We're not talking about a generation or, whatever.
We blinked and here we are.
Yeah, here we are. We live in a time that is all about optimizing every single part of your life. And you can make yourself absolutely crazy, literally, by trying to optimize everything. And I was just thinking about probably about 2 months ago, actually, it's about the time I started using our Full Focus Wellness Planner, which is relevant to what I'm about to say. I quit using my Aura Ring. And I loved my Aura Ring. I thought it was so great. First thing I did every day, to the point that our 5-year-old daughter, Naomi, who always gets up and snuggles with me, she would always say, Mom, did you have a good night's sleep? Because I would check my app to see what's my sleep score, and she would always say, is it good? And I'm like, I don't know. And what I realized was I was feeling so anxious as a result of, did I win or lose sleep? Sleep, like literally the most foundational thing about being a human, and we have all these wearables and we have all, you can have the best drinking glasses. I have these glasses that I love that don't break, like they're made of glass, but like they're super durable, some kind of like Japanese glass. I don't know. It's from a company called Fable if you want to look it up. This is not an essentialism plug, by the way, me telling you this. But like we are optimizing our drinking glasses. That's where we are right now. And when you think of all the things you use every day, the decisions you have to make, it is a tsunami. And so I think for me, one of my takeaways was we have to decide what we're not going to care about, because you literally cannot care about everything, because people that make products and marketers are forever thinking of more things that you should care about. So it's more things that you should buy,
It's so true. Like I'm just thinking that I've gotten into this deep dive on AI this year.
Right.
And so I started accumulating tools. Well, I have about 18, and I'm not making this up, and I'm not proud of it, but I have about 18 different AI tools.
Right.
And it's just like, there's always a new one in my Facebook feed, or there's always a new one that somebody tells me about.
Yeah.
And it's just like, well, I don't want to miss out. So I get that thing. But I think the disciplined pursuit of less means just saying, no, I've got enough tools now, enough software apps, enough things. I don't need anything else. And I kept thinking when he was talking also, the Amish have a point. They're kind of frozen things in time, but at some point they said, this is enough technology.
Mm-hmm.
We're good. We're good. We don't need any more new shiny things.
Yeah.
And, you can, people laugh at them or they think it's, extreme.
Yeah.
But there's a point at which you have to say enough is enough. Do I really need that new iPhone?
Mm-hmm.
Do I really need that new app?
Well, because all of those things, everything you introduce, and I think this is true in our personal lives, it's maybe the easiest to see there around things that we consume, but it's also true in our business, in our professional lives, in our businesses, whatever. Everything we bring in has to be dealt with. Like
requires maintenance.
It requires maintenance or a decision or, like he was talking about the printer that you have to get rid of. Now you got to figure out, where do you get rid of a printer? I don't know. Can I just throw it in the trash, or do I have to go find, a special place that it goes? And, do I have to do anything? And will they're only open certain days a week? And now I got to look at my calendar, just something that is so small and you shouldn't even have to spend any brain power on your printer. Now it could take up half of a day, or, at least a couple of hours trying to deal with it. And I just think there are too many things like that. And we just have to decide, what are we not going to do? What are we not going to care about? Because it is literally impossible. It's like you always say, a version of this is, you always say you can have anything you want, or you can do anything you want, but you can't do everything you want. It's like, you can care about anything you want, but you can't care about everything.
Yeah.
You just can't.
Like that's a David Allen quote, just to give him credit.
Yeah.
But, one of the interesting things to me is I've gotten fascinated by these tiny houses.
Yes.
And so I clicked on one somehow in my Facebook feed, and now I'm getting all these posts, suggested posts on tiny houses. But something about that downsizing, and less decisions to make,
right,
and fewer things to keep up with, is really attractive to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how this is all going to play out in my life, but I feel like these are two books, Effortless and Essentialism, are two books that I need to reread every year.
Yeah.
Because they're so countercultural, and the cultural current is flowing in the exact opposite direction, that you've got to work to keep it effortless and to keep focused on the essentials.
Yeah. So just as a reminder, you can get that course that Greg talked about at Greg McKeown, and McKeown is McKeown. GregMcKeown.com. You can get that for free, which I think would be a great place to start, and definitely order both of these books on Amazon or wherever you like to get books.
Guys, thanks so much for joining us. We'd be so grateful if you would go to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts, rate the show, and if you could, give us a review. It doesn't take long, but it makes a big difference in terms of getting more visibility to the show, so that we can get this message of the double win out. We like to think that we're starting or participating in a movement where there really is work-life balance.
Mm-hmm.
And we feel like you guys are partners with us in that. And your part of it is, if you could review the show, if you could rate it, that would help us to get the message out.
Yep.
So thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.